best practices at this point,
Okay.
or line by lines. I'm really just looking for,
Can you go to like to
what
the
functions
beginning?
can only the owner access? Where are the functions that are the entry points for any
Amazing,
user?
bro.
So all of that. So I'm just kind of going through and tagging all of this.
Can
And
you
it,
go to
realistically,
to
right?
the beginning of the file and tell us like, okay, just open this. What we'll do first?
Say it again.
Let's say you just open this file. What will be your first step
Oh yeah,
into
yeah.
it?
Okay. So I just opened all three files. Looking at this, I know factories come first, right? So I'm looking at this. I'm assuming the factory is going to create these cooler contracts and this clearinghouse. I would hold off on this for now, and I would kind of wait to see when this comes up, going through the factory and cooler, just because I know that these two kind of work together, and this is a typical entry point for users. Is you create something through the factory, and then you own that instance of the contract. So I start with factory, and I will go through here, um, and I'm really like I don't pay too much attention to the events at the moment. The state variables, I'm again not a whole bunch of attention. If something looks weird, and I'll mark it. But like created, that those are created factories. Cooler 4, that is very nested mapping. So maybe here I would say how does this work? And a lot of it early on is me asking, relatively dumb questions. And then as I go through again, I kind of answer it, and then I have this really good mental map of how everything works. But this way, I know not to glance over this down the road, and I know I need to figure out how this mapping works. And then, I would do the same thing here. Mark that, what's going on there, and then generate. This is where, looking at this, anyone can access this. This is where the factory gets created. So I would just mark this. This is anyone, create a factory, and I would leave it at that for now. And it looks like, yeah, they're pass through how much collateral you're putting up, how much debt you want, yeah, and then it creates it and it's done. And then this, I would look at this, and it looks like this is just for emitting events. So that is not super high on my priority list at the moment. I would just write emit events. And one thing I've also done that's really helped with organizing, especially on larger code bases, is I have different tags for different things throughout an audit. So like this right here, like the slash and then the little arrow. I do that because I never see that in a code base. So I know if I were to come over here and look up that, I can see everything I did marked with that. So that kind of helps me find all of these are just notes, questions, and notes, answers, clarification things. And yeah, like I did earlier, right? I rarely ever see question marks on code bases. So I try and do it like this, but sometimes it's second nature to pop that one in. But same thing, right? I can search up that, I can find all of the questions I asked, and that way I can make sure, every question I have gets answered before I complete an audit. I mean, at least ideally, if there's time. Audit contests are a little bit tougher. Yeah, there's the factory. It looks like it creates a cooler. So then I'll go here, and I'm going to go straight to the constructor to kind of see what's being created here. See here. Yeah. And the reason why I don't pay a whole lot of attention to this on the very first run through is because right now these can be anything, and I don't want to waste too much time thinking of all the possibilities. The reality is, right inside the constructor, typically, not in this case, but oftentimes inside the constructor, there's automatic bounds on what those parameters can be. So instead of thinking of anything that can be in here, I want to go based off just the boundaries that the protocol has set. And that helps me kind of find edge cases throughout an audit when I can kind of narrow down those boundaries and see where there's gaps. But looking here, owner, collateral, debt, and then it creates that factory. So here, this is where that once over comes through. Looking at this, the request function, there is no access control there, so I would just say anyone can go there.
You don't even consider the code. You just go for like. Let's say
Yeah.
Let's say this was a view. Would you still like? How do you handle non-stateful stuff?
Like if it was a view function.
Yeah, or pure or something.
Right now, okay. So like I think there's one down here. I it depends what it is. If it's math, like this one, that looks interesting. So I'll just say it's math and internal. On this first one, I really don't look at the math too much. I kind of go with the assumption that it works as intended, just so I can kind of get a flow of how the protocol is supposed to be working. But then once I figure out, what the path is, where that input is for the users, where they enter from this function, and then it gets to the math. Here's what's really helped me find edge cases, and this was actually one of the things on the bug bounty that I submitted, was I kind of keep track of what the parameters can be as it goes through one. So here, right, amount, at this point, it looks like amount can be anything, right? Here, amount can be anything. I know that I am creating a new event, and then I push the request, transfer from the collateral. And what I would end up doing is follow these functions. And this is actually, I should have chose a better code base, because there's actually, this one's almost a little too simple.
No,
Let's
this
say
is
this
perfect.
request,
This is
right?
perfect, bro.
Let's say this request led into a view function that had some math, right? Oftentimes those functions have some checks and parameters. It'll say make sure that amount's not zero, make sure it's less than user balance, whatever it may be. And I kind of keep track of what those parameters will be and what the bounds are. And oftentimes what I'll find is that maybe there's a combination where maybe amount is really low and loan to collateral is really high. And maybe you can get this instance where the loan automatically defaults as soon as it gets filled. So I'm kind of just thinking of those things where what are the boundaries for all of these variables? And then is there a state where they don't work together? Because obviously if it's a normal case, the protocol makes sure that works. But those edge cases where maybe the amount's really high, maybe it's zero, maybe it's a smaller number, maybe loan to collateral is zero. How does that affect the loan? So yeah, that's
question.
like on the view.
Question
Yeah.
for you. I'm seeing. Can you go back to that function? So I'm seeing a couple of things, and I'm not even doing any considerations here. But I could pass maximum. You win 256 in all the values, and I can see an event being created even after.
Yeah.
Even before anything is actually happening. So we're already having some cost on the chain in there, and I also can see transfer from instead of safe transfer from. Is that actually something, or I'm just how much should I trust the
No, that's
developer?
yeah. The safe transfer from that was I think like I can't remember. I think like everyone got like 12 cents from that finding because there's so many
Whoa,
submissions
so
for
this
that
is a
one.
finding?
But
Yeah, boys, take
that
it.
was yeah, that was it. And actually, in this
So
instance,
this is auditing live. This is
yeah,
doing the auditing live
already,
right now.
this has already been audited. This is this is an old contest, so the bug doesn't exist anymore, so there shouldn't be an issue me showing it. I mean, it's a public repo at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this was, you're right.
Nice finding.
What'd you say?
I said nice finding for Miss.
Oh, yeah. Then looking at this, right, and then I started with anything, but I can see, right, I'm transferring whatever the return value is for collateral for where amount and loan collateral. So then after I've done my once over and I know where the entry points are at, I personally like to go on the line by line as soon as I know the entry points. So then I will go into Right? That's just creating an event. You're pushing the request object, and then the transfer from, we're getting a value from collateral for. So then I will go in collateral for, and I see here it's amount times decimals divided by loan to collateral. So looking at this, right, at this point, amount can be anything as long as the return value is what I can afford. So as long as I have enough of that token, the return value can be anything. But I know amount at this point.
Isn't that a problem
No.
in Solidity that I always need to do the multiplications before the divisions because of truncation or something? You know, but
Just from a first glance, they did this fine because they did multiplication first.
okay.
But if there was division first, yeah, that would be like an immediate. I would immediately tag that.
What is the problem in
division
there?
first.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, what is the problem
Yeah.
in doing the division first? You know,
Oh, what's the problem doing division? So Solidity doesn't really handle decimals at all. So typically, right, if you have a calculator and you do 1 divided by 2, you get 0.5. And then you can times it by whatever you want, and it works. So the order you do division multiplication with regular numbers on a calculator on paper is fine. But in Solidity, it doesn't do decimals, and it doesn't really round. It just kind of trims the decimals off. So in Solidity, if I were to do 1 divided by 2, instead of getting 0.5, I would just get 0 because, if I have 0.5, all that decimal stuff just gets trimmed off. And that's, it's a lot of findings are found through, getting that edge case where it's less than 1, so then it rounds down to 0. So like the first depositor attacks, that's another example of that. And it's not division first. You are able to get essentially, and here's one thing I do. I don't really, because it doesn't happen too often, so I don't really look for division before multiplication. But I do think, hey, what can I possibly do? Is there anything I can possibly do to get this loan to collateral to be bigger than my numerator? So can I get my denominator bigger than my numerator? Because as soon as that happens, it's a zero return on on a non-zero input, and oftentimes that's a finding. So that's one thing I always look for. So when I see like any sort of math, right, I get super excited because then I'm just thinking, how can I make these values greater than my numerator? And that's a go-to one there.
one thing that always appears in some people doing recommendations is to not use time time related operations in the chain, but we are always using timestamp. We're always using days for stuff. You ever find like any real problem in that, or is it one of those high theoretical, validator manipulation, or 51% attacks, like we're seeing right in there within the
Yeah.
65 days?
Yeah. The only time I've seen issues with like putting time in your functions and all that is when just like the developer miscalculates it from the beginning. So maybe they'll do 86,000 seconds for a day instead of 86,400. So like it's usually like if I do see an error or an issue with time, it's on like the developer side where they just they put in the wrong value. Maybe they were thinking 1 week, but they did it in seconds and they only did 6 days. So that's where I usually see the errors. And I don't think, I didn't think even the time manipulation was as much of an issue now with proof of stake, because now we have that it's the constant 12 seconds, I believe. So yeah, I really, if at the time, I always check and make sure, like, okay, are you sure you meant this many seconds? Are you sure you meant this much time? I usually think of that, but I don't put too much focus on attacks related to it, just because I don't think there's much, to my knowledge. If there is, please tell me so I can add it to my list. But I haven't seen too many attacks related to time manipulation recently. yeah, outside of like block stuffing and oracles and that stuff. So I guess there is, but that's usually with more complex things, and there's like middleman. So there's actually, so I'm going on a tangent right now. But when I was doing the GMX audit with Guardians, one possible attack we were looking at, there was like I think there was a deadline on the keeper. So essentially, the keeper had to execute the transaction that was given to them in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, they'd scrap it and say sorry, it didn't work. So we were looking for a way, and they had that fixed at a time. So we're looking for a way. Can we, force it to go over this time consistently? Because then all of a sudden everything's blocked and nothing actually can get pushed through. So I guess, yeah, if there's a middleman, then time's a really good knob to twist with. And you can manipulate deadlines and stuff. Yeah, does that make sense?
Total sense, brother. Total sense.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, that's I do a once over, figure out where the user inputs are at, and then I do a line by line as early as possible. I know some people like to do I get a diagram and a mental map and all that stuff. And for bigger projects, I for sure need to do that as well. But for smaller code bases, I find that just going line by line as early as possible works for me, just because it kind of prevents me from having any confirmation bias, any assumptions that something works if I don't have too much context outside of the immediate function right here. And then as I get the whole code base down, then I can start tying in what happens if I roll over a loan a bunch of times and then delegate it to someone else. So then I can start mixing in functions and getting creative. But the first thing I want to do is get line by line, and that is ask a lot of questions. So I ask, can this be 0? What if I do this? What if the state is in low activity? What if there is multiple lenders? Stuff like that. So a lot of it, honestly, like my first goal is once I get this line by line down, I know what's going on there. I like to come back to, where is it at? Come back to this one more time. And I don't care too much about the findings right here. Like I don't try and pattern match too much with findings, just because, if you can pattern match the finding, there's probably 20 others that can as well. So the rarity of the finding is not going to be super great. And honestly, some protocols like the findings don't translate as well. But these questions I've found, these questions work really well, and these questions translate, and they open up a lot broader array of vulnerabilities. So then I start asking. The list is kind of longer now than it used to be, but I ask a lot of these questions with the code base in mind.
It's a really
so
nice,
are there any strict?
really nice
Yeah,
list.
and it yeah, yeah, and I like it. It works really well for me. And when I write these questions, I try and keep it relatively broad. So is there how can I break a strict inequality? What's the difference between the intended check and the implementation? So I ask a lot of these questions throughout it, and usually what ends up happening is my potential findings is this really, really long list of things that might work, and that a lot of those come from those questions I'm asking. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of just start going down that list. Does this actually work? And then that's when I'll pull up Foundry and do a quick POC, or I'll just get some pen and paper and I'll just kind of write it out, especially if it has to do with math and edge cases. I like to just get some pen and paper and kind of just figure out, okay, what if I put this number in? What's the output going to be? Yeah, and then, yeah, I mean, my process isn't too special. You know, just like everyone else, right? I listen to the really good ones, and I try and do the same thing that works. But yeah, one other thing that I learned from Danny, the co-founder of Guardians, um, is he kind of thinks states first. So it's he works backwards, where it's, you know, what is a bad state? What is a state that would be unexpected or negative for the protocol or users? And then he thinks, okay, how can I get to this state? And when he has that end goal in mind, it makes it a lot easier to find those edge cases and to find those instances where things
This
don't
is
work.
really interesting that what you just said right now, because some problems are not in the code. So some
Yeah.
problems actually they are in the code, but you need to create some sort of state first so you can actually. But this is hard. Like this requires a lot of fuzzing. There's any strategy to approaching that?
Um, I don't. I've tried fuzzing in the past, and it works in some cases, but um, the protocol doesn't have like a super solid test suite. It usually ends up taking me more time to figure out to get the whole fuzzing thing set up versus kind of just mentally thinking of those edge cases myself. So when I'm thinking of states, I mean, I wish there was like a really smooth, um, concise process that I could articulate. But really, what it's kind of like a few steps. Like I think like, what's the intention of the protocol? Um, what would be considered bad? So like, what do they not want to happen? So in this case, if it's lending, right? They don't want under collateralized loans. They don't want like premature defaults. They don't want infinite loans, so loans to be able to go on forever with a low interest rates. So things like that. So I'm thinking of, you know, things they wouldn't want, and then I look, okay, well, where's the collateral being stored? How is that collateral being enforced on the loan? And then I think, is there any possible way for me to get this to be under collateralized? And then from there, yeah, it's not a super concise logical process. It's more creative, where I'm thinking of different paths, different inputs,
Have you audited anything
different
that's
steps.
already deployed, like on chain, where you had to fork the protocol, maybe take a look at the last state on chain?
No, I haven't. Actually, it's on my to-do list. There's a new bounty coming out. Or bounty's being updated in a week, I think. And I was going to try it on that one actually, but no, I haven't. Haven't done any like forking on chain and using the data. I want to. Um, I want to. Usually, what I do is I look at their test suite, if they have one, and they have a lot of mocks of, you know, a normal use case. And then when I draw up my Foundry POC, I'll kind of pass in those parameters. So I'll kind of create like a state where you know, I'll mock up 1,000 users, and I'll give them all a balance, and um, I'll use the parameters that are typically given for contracts in their test cases, and then kind of work from there. So no forking, kind of I do it the way less efficient way, and I need to start forking because it would for sure make
Yep,
it easier.
yeah. I mean, some of the stuff we audit on Code for Arena is not even deployed, right? I mean, I guess Immunify would be the best for this, this kind of challenges. But your approach is really down to earth and really interesting, because and usually judging by how much you have audited so far, what is the quality of Solidity developers out there?
It depends where you audit. It's like if you can find highs and mediums on a Code Arena and Sherlock consistently, um, I really think you would be fine on most any audit. Um, Cause like I've gone around and like looked at deployed smart contracts for like small protocols, and the quality of Code Arena contests, Code Arena audits, or the code bases there are really are way better than what you would see if you just went on a random protocols code base and looked at it. Yeah, I've seen protocols where they're like a solid like year behind on best practices, and there's no checks on or checks on using oracles. The no like yeah. So in short, um, the quality of developers that come through Code Arena and Sherlock, from what I've seen, are pretty high compared to the contracts you'll just kind of find in the wild. And obviously, no, like I'm not saying like developers that don't do contests are bad. Not at all. I think the range of contracts that are just out there that are not audited is a pretty huge range, where there's some really dysfunctional contracts out there. Yeah, so
Amazing,
Code
bro.
Arena wise, good code bases. But if you guys ever want a confidence boost, just like go on Reddit or Twitter, find a protocol that says, "Hey, we just launched," or "Hey, we did this," and look at their code base. And you'll find some things for sure.
Bro, I have a question.
Yeah.
So let's say you participated in an auditing contest. Then the protocol decided to do it again. If you were going to re-audit the contracts, what are you going to look for?
I am.
Is
would
it old
look at
findings?
Yeah, I look at a handful of things. I would for sure look at like anything that changed, right? Because a lot of times what I've noticed is that this honestly like some of my recommendations for fixes in the past, like on my very first contest, I think I had a so-so recommendation for how to fix a vulnerability. So sometimes the fix isn't sufficient, or maybe the fix opens up new vulnerabilities that weren't thought of. So the first thing I do is I look at what code was changed. So what code did they fix? Did they get rid of a check or add a check? Because if they add in a check, right, maybe there's opportunity for a DOS now, and stuff like that. So I'm looking at what code did they change, and then I'm looking at any and all issues that were low or maybe considered like a not going to fix. I've also seen instances where an issue's been brought up, or vulnerability's been brought up, and they say, oh, this is a low, we're not going to fix it. But maybe a more creative path, or with more context, that low could kind of be twisted into a medium or a high. And now because they didn't fix that low, that medium or high is open. So I'm looking at anything they chose not to fix and anything they changed are the main things I'm focusing on.
So leading to another question. Have you ever audited a contract or participated in a contest? Then after they launched, they got hacked. Have you ever?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. I know there is one on Sherlock a few months ago, but I'm pretty sure I didn't participate in that one. But I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not really ever surprised. Too surprised when that happens. Like if you look at like the big Immunify audit reports and stuff, and you'll see they have 10, 12 audit reports, and every single audit report might be finding something. I definitely don't think a single audit is like it'll fix all your issues. There's no problems there. Yeah, so I would. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure if I do enough audit contests, I'm sure it'll happen eventually.
Okay, let's dig into your philosophy. So let's say you audited a protocol, then it happened to get hacked like for $100 million. would you feel guilty for that? For missing bugs?
I would feel so guilty.
You
Great
did your best.
question.
You did your best.
Yeah, I mean, no, I could rationalize it for sure. I can say, I did my best.
If you did your best,
I could.
but
Yeah.
that's
So
if you did your best. If you didn't audit that much, or like you didn't put too much effort into it, maybe yeah, you have the right to feel guilty.
But can I
yeah.
can I
I
add
guess
something?
maybe
Can I add something
yeah.
here? The hard thing with auditing is until someone shows you some vulnerability, it's practically impossible for you to like understand and find out about it.
True.
Every new vulnerability is like a lot of research from someone that had a lot of experience. And then first we had the reentrancy with the DAO, and then from that we went to some flash loans, and then we went to oracles. So as an auditor, it's really hard. I mean, if you're not trust, if you're not a bronze, it's really hard to be creative. Like because imagine how many 0 days we have we don't even know about. Like it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I guess maybe the wrong word. Maybe it's not guilty. But I feel bad for the users, I guess. I don't feel guilty like, oh, this is my fault it got through. Because yeah, you're right. Like there's going to be attack vectors a year from now that none of us really know about. And couldn't
Okay,
really.
Kiki, let's take it one step further. Okay, let's say it's not an auditing contest; it's a sole audit, and you're the sole responsible auditor for the safety of the protocol. How about this one?
It'd be, I think it'd be the same. I'd feel bad for the protocol and the users. But I don't think like protocols should be like outsourcing all the security risk and responsibilities on a single auditor. I think that's why it's important to have multiple audits for
Agreed.
sure. And yeah, so like I feel bad. I wouldn't feel like it's my fault because I know especially on a private audit where I can kind of choose the duration of how much time I want to spend. So I always give myself ample time to uncover every possible thing I can think of. So it's not like an audit contest where I'll only have 3 days. I can only get to 80% of it. If it's a private audit, I'm going to get to 100% of it. So I wouldn't feel too bad because I know like at the end of that time, I found everything I possibly could.
I think Maxwell has a question. Maxwell?
I was going to respond to that. I'm a Web 2 pen tester. I've been doing that for about 4 years, and misfindings just happen. You can work as hard as you want, but there may be some attack you don't know about. There may be a change in the protocol that wasn't anticipated in your threat model. It's really not possible to find absolutely everything. You can do your best, and that's all you can really do.
Yeah.
Hey Max,
Yeah.
what type of penetration testing are you doing? Web or network or what exactly?
I do like IoT and web stuff for the most part. Trying to transition to a little bit
For
more
the
Web
web
3
thing,
now.
like you have the checklist. If you go through the checklist, let's say a WASP checklist, and you find everything you can find, then you're not the one to blame, man. Especially when developers push code and they don't notify you. Let's say like developers. I'm sorry, guys, we're going off topic, but it's the same thing for Web 2 and Web 3. If developers in Web 2 they push the code or they add another functionality without going back to security or without notifying the security company that's providing the testing, you have nothing to do, man. It's not your fault. You did everything you
Yeah,
can.
for sure. Yeah. And I think there was a couple of times I've seen like there's been hacks this year where it was just like you said, right? There is a hack on a code change that hasn't been audited. So like for that, obviously, like there's nothing I could have done about that. Yeah. So I for sure like I would never like promise a protocol, hey, I'm going to find every single vulnerability there ever can be in your thing. So yeah, I feel bad for the users, because it's a hack and that sucks. But you're right, like there's things that are going to be missed that don't exist right now that are known about right now that can change over time because there's changes to the code. So yeah, no, you're totally right.
What about our friend Endless C? Sorry, sorry, Maxwell. Go on.
Oh, I had a question, actually, if that's okay. So recently, I tried participating in a code free audit, and I was having a tough time getting like understanding the protocol. But after I understood the protocol, it was even harder for me to really dive into the test suite, understand how to try out my ideas. So, what is your strategy when you're testing something that has a test suite for understanding the test suite well enough to actually run your ideas out?
Um, was it a hard hat or foundry test suite?
I think it was hard hat.
Oh yeah, hard hat. Yeah, those are for sure tougher than foundry ones. So honestly, something I've started to do, and it's just been quicker for me this way, uh, is I will kind of create a kind of quick and dirty test suite in Foundry, um, and that helps. What I've also done, I think I got this from Xerox52. He said he uses a lot of Remix, and it seems like, oh, that's a beginner thing. You shouldn't have to use that. But honestly, like creating like a dumbed down mock version of what you think an attack could be in Remix saves a lot of time and a lot of times it'll kind of get rid of those false positives. But I don't have a good answer for hard hat. Usually, I'll try and do what I can in Foundry. So I'll move what's important over to Foundry and test it there, or I'll create like a mock version of it.
Okay, yeah, it's the mocking that's hard to me because like the CTF challenges are really self-contained. The values are pretty simple, so it's easy to create those sorts of mocks.
True.
But when you have a protocol that's trying to handle a lot of different external factors, it's always been hard for me to deal with that.
Yeah. That is.
Have you tried forking the chain, Max, and trying to see if you can, do the hard work of setting up everything?
Yeah, I've done that some. Not all the test suites, particularly the hard hat, are set up that way though. They're set up with complete mocks of everything. I didn't mean to derail the conversation though.
That's a great question. And yeah, I don't like, especially for audit contests. Like for me, like if it's something where like you said, right, it's this really complex code base where there's so many moving parts. How do I mock it up? If it's in Foundry, cool, I can do it. If it's in Hard Hat and it's not doable in that 3-day time frame or 5-day time frame, I try and like I try and just do it like without the test suite. So I'll do a whiteboard or a simpler version of it. Yeah, because if in an audit contest is tough because you're very time restricted and you don't want to spend so much time proving something right or wrong that you miss out on everything else. So yeah, I try and do it pen and paper or a simpler version, and I try and use really basic numbers when I can, and not try and get the state in like the simplest place as possible. So I don't include or I don't use any like the unimportant variables, which sounds kind of reckless. But if a state variable, like if it's not relevant to the specific attack, I try and just reduce that, move that stuff out the way, and just focus on what exactly is needed for this attack, what's being affected, and then work from there. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
What about our friend Emilian or and let's see, Nax, 0x6, everybody please feel free to make questions.
Yep. Kikidev, thank you for the auditing process. It was insightful, especially when some auditors talked about like having one state in mind and how you deliberated it about like, I guess it comes from experience, yeah? Because what I found for myself that it is hard for me to find the negative states if you don't understand the protocol as well enough. And I have seen that when you go through the code base, you already have pattern matching. Yeah, you see, oh, there might be some arithmetic, like the numbers problem. There might be the not checking of Oracle, as you have said. And I guess it comes more from the experience. I have maybe a question not related to this particular contract. I first of all congratulate you got into Spearbit. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm actually planning to go there, like to apply for the test as well, but I'm on the preparation state. Could you say what that technical part of it? How hard is it? Is like, is it on the level of like code for Arena type of contract, or any tips on that part?
It's let's see.
Or sorry, is
for-
it like not disclosable? Sorry, I don't know.
I don't. I mean, I can't like. I don't think. I'm pretty sure I can't say like, oh, it was the contract was this. But I.
Oh no, of course.
Oh, you're good. I can figure out a way to answer this. For me, the contracts themselves were more complex than the Code Arena ones. There wasn't a whole lot of like boilerplate, like, oh, this is an NFT, or oh, this is withdraw or deposit. For me, it was more complex, and you really had to understand the EVM well, because it's a 55-minute test. So the contracts aren't huge, but they're dense, right? And there's a lot to it in that little bit. So for me, practicing like those Securium races, because those are also those are relatively complex and small contracts. So that was really good practice for me. Just because yeah, this is different. Like an audit contest, there's a lot of functions and a lot of stuff that is not super complex, and you can just kind of look at it and you know what it's supposed to be doing. But in those time tests, you can't assume anything, because every single line, every single thing is really, really important, and there very well could be something anywhere. So the Securium stuff, those races is a really, really good resource.
Yep, gotcha. Thanks, man. Thanks for the
Yeah.
alpha.
Yeah.
About Emelian.
Ooh,
The boys are shy. So Kiki,
yeah.
when you get stuck, like what do you do, man? Do you like go out? What do you do when you can't audit anymore? Like you see the code, but you make no sense out of it. What do you
Oh
do?
yeah. I've had those days.
What's your cool down process?
Great question, brother.
It's honestly, it is taking a day off. And it's hanging out with family, maybe some basketball. Yeah, there's been times where like I really, really, really want to get through a contract or like get through a possible attack, and then I'll catch myself like reading like a really basic required statement for 15 minutes. Like, okay, well, clearly nothing's sticking right now because I've been on the same line for a while. So then it's honestly just taking a day off, and then usually I come back refreshed and like antsy and really wanting to get back in the code. So just like a day off where I'm thinking about auditing as little as possible. It's hard to do. Like I'll
It's
still
really
catch
hard.
myself like, oh, I'm bored. Let me go pull up an audit report. Oh, let me look at what this guy's saying. Or read this article. But like really just a day off where like I'm coming back eager to code or to audit. It's kind of been my thing.
Okay, so another one. 1 minute. Okay, go. Yeah, you can go.
Ooh, okay. So for the Chat GPT, I wish I could use it more, but I usually end up just telling it it's wrong. So I'll ask it a question about solidity, and then they'll tell me something like, no, you're wrong, that's not how it works. And then they'll say, oh, sorry, you're right. So I wish I could use it more. When it comes to like tricky math or things that have been around for a long time, I'll use ChatGPT for that. So I'll throw in the math equation, or maybe if it's dealing with like, and then for a little bit I was looking into like Merkle roots. So I'll throw that in there just to kind of get a better explanation and a starting point. But like for auditing, I really don't use it too much. I wish I could, but I usually end up being more frustrated at it than it helps me. But it is nice for mocking up things, right? So you could type in, give me a contract that I can withdraw and deposit ERC20 tokens and send it to users. I'll spit that out in 2 seconds, so you can throw it in a remix pretty well. So I use it for mocking up things, but for the actual like trying to find vulnerabilities, it doesn't do much for me, unfortunately. Yeah. And then the second one, what was the question for the second one? Sorry.
I guess one of the hardest questions is when do we feel safe to stop the fuzzling and move on from that function, when we kind of feel that, okay, I guess there's not many problems out that could get out of this.
Yeah. That's really tough. I try and hold off on like okaying or like checking off a function until the very, very end. Just because I don't want to like, as nice as it would be to like say, oh, this function's good, and the contract gets smaller and smaller, and all of a sudden I don't have much left to audit. I know there's times where maybe a function in one contract and a function in a different one ate away, are both are relevant to each other. So I try not to mark them off until the very, very end. And I don't know, it's until I've exhausted everything I can think of. I guess, yeah. But I guess, yeah, no real secret, just I wait till the end to okay anything. And then, yeah.
Next, open your mic, bro. No problem. I see you're typing. Feel free to open your mic. No need to be shy. We are learning here.
Let me ask Kiki a quick question, miss. Okay.
Go on.
So about the list of questions that you have for auditing, Kiki.
Mhm.
Something is it the list of questions that you had, the list of questions you want, like when you go through an audit, you check for them, right? The Excel sheet. Okay, so did you build it from going through audits, or is it like a combination of questions that you saw on Twitter threads, ChatGPT, your own auditing experience? How did you build the list?
So it's two things. It's either whenever I finish an audit contest, I go through and look at all the findings I've missed, and then I ask. I just try and get to the root of it. So I ask, what are questions that
Smart
auditor
move.
asked that I didn't ask? So I look at findings I missed, and I say, what questions could I have asked to find this thing? What leads me to that finding? So a lot of these are those kind of questions and findings that I've missed, and then other ones that you look here, and you'll see like a bunch of Oracle ones, Oracle-related
How
ones over
often
here.
those questions are your knowledge or something that you could never know by yourself?
Sorry, what do you mean?
I mean, like sometimes we see an error and we are sure, like I will never be able to find this. Like then you need to see some POC or something to actually make sense of it.
Oh yeah. Well, usually if it's from a contest I've audited, I'm familiar enough with the code that like as soon as I read like sometimes like I'll read the title of the finding, I'm like, yeah, you're right, I missed that. And then the other ones, yeah, there are more complex. Like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was possible. So if there are ones I've audited, I can grab my head around it pretty quickly. And those are pretty easy to put down. If it's from an audit report that I'm not familiar with, that for sure takes me more time. And if it's really, really not sticking, Usually I'll just move on to a different finding and do that, just because I don't want to spend so much time on a finding that doesn't make sense to me, when there are tons of other ones out there, and maybe there might be other reports of the same vulnerability that click. So if it doesn't make sense, then I'll move on. But it doesn't happen too often.
What is a problem you see too much, like happening often with contracts?
Keeping track of like state variables. So there's a lot of times where like it's literally just like they won't keep track of the state variable, where they make a change in one function and then they forget to reset it, or they don't make the change permanent, right? So maybe it's a change in memory and not storage. So keeping track of the state is for sure one I see, and then just Oracle ones are huge.
What you mean with keeping track of the state, like having this, let's say, wasted storage in there, like this variable used once and never more, or like what is keeping track of the
No,
state?
more like they will, if they do some math and they update a variable, it might get updated in memory in one spot, and then they'll change it right afterwards, right? So they'll change it right afterwards, so then it's not consistent, or they'll change it in state, they'll update it in state, in storage, and then they'll change it again right afterwards. So there's been a lot of times I've seen where they set a variable or they get a value, and then they either change it right afterwards or they end up using a different one. So those are kind of like developer side mistakes. It's not things really you can find. Something that I see consistently, like, it's really, really hard to do implement the Oracle correctly. So oftentimes there's so many edge cases and ways
What
in Oracle.
kinds of Oracle? Price Oracle, gas
Yeah, so
Oracle.
price Oracle, like the randomness oracles, like there's, if you look at the chain link documentation, there's a lot of things where they say you need to add this, make sure you check for this, only allow this. And if you don't do it, the protocol, like, it'll run just fine, and it won't like stop. But if you don't add those checks, there's a lot of edge cases that can happen. So those, like, if a lot of the unique findings that I've seen, like looking through audit reports, have been Oracle related, and just those edge cases. And yeah, it's oftentimes it's just like a chain link price feed that's not implemented correctly, or they don't use the data correctly. Lots of issues there from what I've seen.
And it's crazy, right? I mean, one question that I have for you, bro. Sometimes we see these really complicated attacks. So we have these flash loans going over 10 different protocols and manipulating different oracles. You think those are automated, or there's actually someone there trying doing these things?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, to me, it being automated makes sense. But I mean, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because they are so complicated, no way someone could have, this amount of information about it. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I could totally see someone, writing something up, and then kind of just automatically executing that.
How do you
over and over.
feel about Huff and the alternative DSLs we have today for the EVM?
I like it. I mean, I haven't dug into it, but you go over to like the Spearbit Discord, or you can just look on Twitter, right? Like, everyone's so excited about Huff, and they talk about how, like, if you learn how to do things in Huff, you understand the EVM way better, and can approach things better. So yeah, no, I haven't done much with it, but I definitely think it's worth looking into.
What about MEV? Did you try it any MEV so far?
No, I have not. No, no, I've been strictly just auditing and smart contract security. Have you?
I wish, bro, but everybody keeps MEV like such a secret, like no information. Like the maximum you get is like, okay, you can simulate the transactions and you can make these
Yeah.
deployments, but there's no real I wish there's more information around.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That'd be cool. That would be cool.
Hey, I have one question. Okay. So while you are auditing, is there any like you're dedicating times to different kind of functions? Like there's a bug, but you are not getting any idea like how to exploit this bug. You are pretty sure that there is a bug. What do you do at that time?
So it depends. Actually, I had this on a private audit a little bit ago. There is a bug where essentially they when they withdraw the fees from the contract, they withdraw like a balance variable, and that balance variable was supposed to be the entire balance of the contract. But I knew, right, if at any point the actual balance of the contract is less than that variable, they can't withdraw anything. It would be an underflow. So I knew that was going to be an issue, and I spent probably like 15, 20 minutes trying to find a creative way to exploit it and create this big vulnerability. But then it's a private audit, so I'm not getting a big bonus for criticals versus lows. I knew the fix, no matter what the path was going to be. I knew the fix was going to be withdraw total balance versus withdrawing variable amounts. So I for a private audit, I just put in the fix, and I would call it a low. And this way, I have more time to spend on other findings and other vulnerabilities. So if I know the fix immediately, I try and just plug that in, and assuming that doesn't break anything else, I just plug that in. But yeah, if it's an audit contest, it's tough, right? You kind of go down a rabbit hole, and sometimes you'll find something, and sometimes you'll spend a bunch of hours and it'll be nothing. So yeah, it kind of just comes with repetition, where like the more you do it, the quicker you'll realize this is a vulnerability, this is how you break it, or the quicker you'll realize, no, this isn't because they have this check here.
So, what do you do like when you feel about you ran out of ideas?
If if I ran out of ideas to like to break it, but I know the vulnerability is there.
Yeah.
I-
You're pretty sure that there's this something is fishy over here, and you ran out of ideas.
If I know what the fix is going to be, regardless, I'll recommend the fix. So there's been times where like you know something is wrong, so you can just no matter what the vulnerability is, you can give them the fix. And if it's an audit contest, what I found works really well is like being in teams. Being in teams works really well for kind of getting into those more creative exploits, because you can kind of brainstorm questions. You both have different perspectives, so teaming up is really helpful for doing that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
So much alpha, in this talk with you. I mean, this is really like, thank you so much for putting your time. I mean, if anybody doesn't have any question, I'm gonna release my friend kikidev because he has some money to make. And thank you so much, brothers. Any questions, guys?
I've got to hop off. Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you
time.
so much, brother.
That's great, man.
It was really
Thank
great.
you.
And please share
Hopefully
share this alpha with us, the document. Please, if you can hop it off, that would be
Yeah, okay, I
great.
will.
Okay. and
Yeah, I can do
show
that.
show up more. Come more, to see us. We like you very much. Okay.
Okay, I will. I
Bye
will.
bye, brother. See ya.